What if I told you R-Truth didn't just leave WWE? He escaped it? He wasn't just cut. He was silenced. Not by a contract. Not by a clause. But by a machine that knows how to erase names without saying a word. But before we continue, let us know your best R-Truth moment in the comments below. Let's get something straight, WWE has fired hundreds of wrestlers over the years. Most leave quietly. Some rage on podcasts. Some crawl back. Others vanish entirely. But R-Truth? His exit wasn't loud. It was silent, and that's exactly why it hit different. This is a man who gave 2 decades to WWE. A man who danced, joked, got pinned, got back up, and smiled while doing it. A man who made gold out of garbage, literally, with the 24/7 title. And then? Gone. No farewell. No thank you video. No emotional goodbye like Edge or Ray or Cena. Just radio silence. And then the whispers started. Whispers that Triple H was furious. That R-Truth turned down one last offer. That his merch was yanked. His name blacklisted. That Triple H, who built his own second chance with DX, with NXT, with power, couldn't stomach the idea of R-Truth walking away on his own terms. And now? Some say Triple H slammed R-Truth behind closed doors. Others say he won't even speak his name. But here's the most outrageous part. R-Truth may be getting punished for leaving a company that had already cut him loose. Let that sink in. He didn't jump ship to AEW right away. He didn't trash the company. He just walked out and took his silence with him. And in WWE? That's not loyalty. That's betrayal. So, what really happened? What if I told you R-Truth didn't just leave WWE, he escaped it? That sounds dramatic. But if you've been paying attention, you already know WWE doesn't just lose people like R-Truth. When someone who's been with the company for over 2 decades disappears, and nobody says a word, not a goodbye, not a thank you, not even a vague farewell tweet, something's off. Especially when that person isn't just some mid-carder floating between brands. We're talking about a veteran who was still making money for WWE. Still over with the crowd. Still doing exactly what the company asked. No controversies. No injuries. No attitude problems. Then boom, he's gone. Not only that, his shirts are banned, his name is blacklisted, and Triple H is reportedly furious. Let that sink in. This isn't a retirement. It's not a quiet contract ending. It's a ghosting. A scrubbing. A blackout. So, here's the real question, what did R-Truth do that made WWE want to erase him? We've seen stars come and go from WWE 1,000 times. But R-Truth? He wasn't just any star. He was WWE's utility man. Funny when they needed funny. Serious when they needed serious. Reliable. Always on time. Always said yes. You think someone like that just gets cut? No press release. No official goodbye. Not even a segment to write him off TV. Instead, what we got was silence. Followed by reports that Triple H extended him a final offer, and R-Truth turned it down. That changes everything. Because now, this isn't a case of WWE letting him go. It's a case of R-Truth saying, no, I'm done playing this game. And walking away. That's not leaving. That's escaping. Let's pause for a second and break that down. Triple H, known for rewarding loyalty, offers you a final deal. This is the same guy who brought back dozens of released wrestlers once he took creative control. People like Johnny Gargano, Braun Strowman, Karrion Kross. He gave second chances. Third chances. So why would someone like R-Truth, who's done everything WWE ever asked, refuse? He's not young. He's not broke. But he was still relevant. still in the mix. And for someone that deep in the WWE system, walking away cold isn't just rare. It's unheard of. Unless something went down. Something the company didn't want public. Something they didn't want you to know. Because what happened next wasn't just silence. It was scorched earth. Fans started noticing something strange. No new merchandise. No acknowledgement on commentary. No, we wish him the best in his future endeavors statement. His name was gone. But the heat didn't stop there. Sources backstage started whispering, Triple H was livid. Some say he trashed R-Truth behind closed doors. Others say he acted like the man never existed. And the WWE machine? It moved on like he was never part of it. But here's where things get wild. R-Truth may have been punished for walking away from a company that already tried to cut him loose. That's what makes this story different. Most of the time, WWE controls the narrative. They spin the release. They frame the exit. But this time? R-Truth left before they could finish the script. And WWE hates when they lose control of the story. This isn't just a wrestling story. This is a loyalty story. This is what happens when someone gives everything to a system that never intended to give anything back. It's about a performer who was asked to carry the comedy division, put over everyone they gave him, and smile while doing it, until one day, they tried to lowball him. And instead of playing ball? He said no. And walked out with nothing. Not because he had a better offer. Not because he was angry. But because he finally saw what was behind the curtain. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud, R-Truth didn't just break character. He broke the code. The code that says, stay quiet. Be grateful. Don't ask questions. Take what you're given. He broke all of that. And WWE's reaction? Erase him. Silence him. Pretend it never happened. But the truth always finds a way out. And in this case, the truth has a story worth telling. Because this isn't about a contract. It's about control. And if you stick around, we're going to break down everything WWE didn't want you to know about R-Truth's final chapter. The offer. The blacklist. The real reason Triple H may never say his name again. And most importantly, why walking away may have been the greatest promo R-Truth ever cut. Who is R-Truth, really? To understand why R-Truth's departure from WWE feels like more than just a release, you have to understand who he really is. Not the goofy character fans saw running after the 24/7 title. Not the punchline in backstage segments. The real R-Truth. The man behind the entertainment. The workhorse who survived eras, gimmicks, and industry shifts. The guy who outlasted locker room drama, company takeovers, and generational changes, not by chance, but by design. His name is Ron Killings. Born in Charlotte, North Carolina. Before he ever stepped inside a wrestling ring, he was surviving the streets. Wrestling didn't just give him a career, it gave him an escape route. It gave him structure, purpose, identity. But his path into the business wasn't typical. It wasn't family connections. It wasn't college football. It was music. He was an artist before he was a wrestler. And that artistic energy never left. He trained under Manny Fernandez and debuted in 1997, long before WWE even knew his name. Back then, he was known as K-Crush on the Indies. Hungry, athletic, and unpredictable. He was different. He didn't just perform moves, he performed. Every step in the ring, every promo, every gesture was part of a rhythm. That rhythm was his signature. And it made him stand out fast. In 2000, WWE signed him. He debuted as K-Quick. His pairing with Road Dogg gave him immediate exposure, but the ceiling was low. WWE didn't quite know what to do with a hip-hop character that wasn't a stereotype. They leaned on comedy. They leaned on rapping intros. But even then, Truth made it work. He didn't phone it in. He found ways to make fans laugh and still get over as a legit athlete. That balance? Almost no one pulls it off. After WWE released him in 2002, most would have faded. Not him. He went to TNA and reinvented himself as Ron the Truth Killings. That name wasn't just branding, it was a mission. He became the first recognized African-American NWA World Heavyweight Champion in TNA history. That title win was monumental. It wasn't handed to him. He earned it in front of a crowd that wasn't expecting it, and he delivered. His promos became sharper. His character deeper. This wasn't just a comedy act. This was a main event talent finally being treated like one. TNA saw what WWE didn't. And for a while, it looked like Truth would stay there and build something. But in 2008, WWE came knocking again. And this time, they wanted him back. When R-Truth returned to WWE, he did it with the confidence of someone who had already proven himself. But WWE still didn't quite know what to do with him. So what did he do? He made it impossible to ignore him. He cut promos like no one else. He moved with charisma. He engaged with fans in a way that didn't feel scripted. He started getting pops just by showing up. And then came the heel turn in 2011. The smoking gimmick. The Little Jimmy storyline. On paper, it was absurd. But R-Truth took the most ridiculous creative they could give him and made it memorable. He went from mid-card rapper to psychotic heel in one night, and made it believable. Suddenly, he was in main events. He was challenging John Cena for the WWE Championship at Capital Punishment. He was headlining pay-per-views. He was carrying segments with guys like The Rock. But WWE didn't stay the course. Once the title shots dried up, R-Truth was moved back down the card. And here's where most guys start to fade. Not him. He adapted. The 24/7 title era came, and instead of treating it like a joke, he turned it into a goldmine. He made that title relevant through sheer force of charisma. Week after week, he turned backstage segments into must-watch moments. He gave the title a personality. He elevated it. And in doing so, he showed the locker room a lesson most stars never learn: every moment on screen is a chance to connect. Doesn't matter if it's a 5-star match or a 5-second skit. R-Truth understood that better than anyone. And what made it more powerful was how he did it without ego. He lost more matches than he won. He was pinned more times than almost any superstar on the roster. But you never heard him complain. Never saw him phone it in. He showed up, hit his mark, and left the audience smiling. Behind the scenes, wrestlers respected him. He was known as a locker room leader. A mentor to younger talent. A guy who showed up on time, stayed late, and kept morale up. That kind of presence is rare in any industry, but in WWE's pressure cooker environment, it's gold. He never politicized. Never leaked stories. Never chased headlines. That kind of professionalism is why his sudden disappearance raised so many red flags. Because when someone who's that dependable, that beloved, and that consistent disappears without warning, it doesn't feel like business. It feels like personal. Let's put it in perspective. R-Truth has shared the ring with everyone from The Undertaker to Roman Reigns. From Randy Orton to Brock Lesnar. And he's made them all laugh. He's made them all look good. That's value you can't measure with title belts or win-loss records. He's been the comedic relief, the fall guy, the hype man, the surprise winner, the veteran partner, the crowd favorite, the throwback icon, the locker room peacekeeper. And he's worn every one of those hats with pride. In a company that burns through talent like paper, R-Truth lasted because he knew how to evolve. He didn't chase the spotlight. He built his own. And maybe that's what made him dangerous. Because when a guy like that finally says, "no more," he's not just walking away from the job. He's walking away from the whole system. The politics. The games. The corporate narratives. He's walking away on his own terms. And WWE doesn't do well with people who write their own endings. Because who R-Truth really is someone they couldn't control forever. And now that he's gone, the silence around his exit isn't just suspicious. It's deafening. To understand R-Truth's decision to walk away, you need to understand the environment he walked away from. WWE isn't just a wrestling company. It's a machine. It doesn't function like a team. It functions like an empire. Every match, every promo, every backstage segment is part of a larger system that prioritizes control over everything else. Control of the storylines. Control of the characters. And, more than anything, control of the people. This isn't new. WWE's control issues go back decades. Look at how they rename wrestlers when they arrive from the indies. They don't want to promote a star who got big somewhere else. They want to own your beginning, your rise, and your future. CM Punk didn't become CM Punk because WWE created him. He became CM Punk in spite of WWE. Same with Daniel Bryan, Dean Ambrose, Cody Rhodes, even Roman Reigns to a degree. The moment a performer starts to transcend the system, either creatively or emotionally, they become a problem. Not a person. A problem. WWE signs talent, builds them up, markets them, then strips them of control. The goal is to make you dependent. On creative. On management. On the brand. If you don't play along, your push disappears. Your TV time vanishes. Your merch dries up. And your fan connection? They'll edit it out of the recap package. This culture isn't a bug in the system. It's the system. Vince McMahon designed it that way. Triple H has inherited it, evolved it, made it more palatable on the surface, but the core hasn't changed. Control is still king. The locker room might be less toxic now, the creative process more collaborative, but the leash is still there. It's just invisible. That leash is something R-Truth knew well. He spent years learning how to stay within the lines. But he also learned when to bend them. That's why he lasted so long. He didn't challenge the system directly. He worked within it. He found his space. He made himself too valuable to cut, too consistent to ignore. He made the machine look good, and in return, they gave him airtime. Not always prestige, but presence. Until, suddenly, they didn't. And the reason that matters is because WWE has a long history of pushing people out quietly when they no longer want to share control. Take Mustafa Ali. Spoke out about his creative direction? Benched for months. Bray Wyatt? Took risks with character work, got over on his own terms, and suddenly found himself released during peak popularity. Mickie James? Shipped her gear in a garbage bag. Zack Ryder built his own YouTube show and got buried for it. Even Sasha Banks and Naomi. They walked out, and WWE's first instinct wasn't to listen. It was to erase. To freeze their contracts. To pull their merch. To send a message. That message is clear: you don't control your narrative. We do. Now think about R-Truth. He didn't lash out. He didn't throw a tantrum. He didn't go public. He simply said no. And in WWE's culture, that might be the loudest rebellion of all. Because this isn't a company that takes no for an answer. If you're not saying yes, you're saying goodbye. R-Truth said no to a final deal from Triple H, and the fallout wasn't just professional. It was personal. They pulled his name from scripts. They reportedly ended all future licensing. There was no farewell package. No tribute tweet. Nothing. That silence? That wasn't forgetfulness. It was strategy. Silence is WWE's version of punishment when public heat would backfire. They can't bury R-Truth on camera because fans love him too much. So they bury him in absence. They erase him quietly. They let time dull the memory. And they bet on fans forgetting. But here's what they underestimate: control only works when nobody notices it. The more they try to suppress a name, the louder the fans ask about it. Why isn't he on Raw anymore? Why haven't we seen him backstage? Why did his shirts disappear from the shop overnight? The more questions fans ask, the more cracks appear in the system. And once fans start seeing the patterns, the whole machine starts to look a little less polished. Because when someone like R-Truth, funny, harmless, non-threatening, is suddenly treated like a ghost, it tells you something. It tells you that even being loyal, even being a company man, even being quiet isn't enough protection when you make the mistake of thinking you can say no. There's a story from years ago that captures WWE's culture perfectly. A young wrestler was gaining momentum. Not in the main event, but bubbling under. He asked for a slight change to his character. Management said no. Not because the idea was bad, but because it wasn't theirs. He tried again. Got benched for 2 months. That's how it works. You step out of line once, you disappear. You speak up without permission, you pay for it. That's not a partnership. That's a dictatorship in disguise. And it's not just the top stars who feel it. It's everyone. New talent is warned early: don't rock the boat. Say yes. Smile in meetings. Keep your head down. You want TV time? Say the lines. Hit the cues. Shake the hands. Don't question the creative, even if it makes no sense. Especially if it makes no sense. Now zoom out. R-Truth did all of that for decades. Decades. And when the company lowballed him, allegedly offering less money, fewer dates, and limited creative, he made a decision. Not out of ego. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. He knew the system. He played by the rules. And the rules didn't protect him. So, he opted out. And the moment he did, the system responded the only way it knows how. Erase, ignore, and deny. That's not a workplace. That's a fortress. And walking out of that fortress isn't just brave, it's rare. Most wrestlers don't get to write their own ending. They get chewed up, spat out, or handed a generic goodbye. R-Truth walked away before they could write his last chapter. He took the pen back. And that, in WWE's culture of control, is the one move they never see coming. Because when you've built your value on being useful, agreeable, and loyal, the moment you flip the script, you're not just making a career decision. You're committing an act of rebellion. And make no mistake, WWE noticed. They didn't fire him. They offered him a deal. He said no. And for that, they've acted like he doesn't exist. But the fans? They remember. And as long as people ask, what happened to R-Truth? The story stays alive. The cracks keep spreading. And the illusion of control gets a little weaker. Because the real truth about WWE isn't what you see on TV. It's what happens when the cameras aren't rolling. And the people who finally walk away are the ones you should be paying the most attention to. At first, there was nothing. No statement. No segment. No buzz. Just silence. For a while, most fans didn't even notice R-Truth was gone. That's what happens when you've been conditioned to see certain wrestlers as background players. They become part of the furniture, always there, always dependable. You don't think about them until they're gone. Then the absence hits, and something feels off. That's exactly what happened with R-Truth. He wasn't in the ring. He wasn't backstage. He wasn't on commentary. No social media content. No appearances. And WWE? They said absolutely nothing. Not a peep. At first, the assumption was injury. R-Truth had dealt with some minor setbacks in the past. Maybe he was just recovering. Maybe they were waiting for a return. But as weeks turned into months, and still no mention, the mood changed. Fans started asking questions. Where's R-Truth? Is he okay? Why hasn't WWE acknowledged his absence? And WWE's silence became the loudest clue. It wasn't just a disappearing act. It was a shutdown. A deliberate refusal to engage. Here's what we now know from sources close to the situation. At some point during contract negotiations, Triple H made R-Truth an offer. Not a lucrative one. Not a legacy contract. An offer, nonetheless. A deal to stay on in a reduced role, reportedly with fewer dates and less money. A way to keep him around without fully investing in his future. On paper, it sounded like a safe move. WWE gets to say they kept a veteran. R-Truth gets to hang around the locker room, do occasional comedy spots, maybe serve as a mentor to the younger guys. No risk. No drama. But R-Truth said no. No negotiation. No drama. Just a clear, quiet no. That moment right there, that's the real departure. WWE didn't release him. He rejected them. That flipped the script. Because in WWE structure, exits are usually framed as their decision. Budget cuts. Creative has nothing. We wish them the best. They control the optics. The narrative. The flow of information. But not this time. There was no press release because they didn't want to admit he turned them down. There was no farewell because they didn't want to acknowledge that he left on his own terms. And there was no tribute because WWE only honors the people they control. Instead, they chose silence. But the more you dig, the more the story starts to unravel. WWE didn't just stay quiet. They shut down everything connected to him. Fan reports began circulating that his merchandise was pulled from the online store almost immediately after his exit. WWE didn't say it publicly, but the move was unmistakable. Shirts gone. Listings deleted. No explanation. On internal run sheets and scripts, his name stopped appearing. Even segments that referenced the 24/7 title, a gimmick he helped make successful, stopped using footage of him. He wasn't mentioned in interviews. Wasn't shown in flashbacks. WWE went out of their way to scrub him from the present. That level of removal doesn't happen by accident. It wasn't logistics. It wasn't a simple oversight. It was intentional. And that raises the question, why? Why would WWE go to such lengths to erase a guy they never pushed as a main eventer? Why care so much about a mid-card veteran turning down a contract? The answer lies in what R-Truth represented, not who he was on TV, but what he symbolized backstage. He was the blueprint of a company man. Loyal. Consistent. Easy to work with. He took bad creative and made it entertaining. He lost constantly and never complained. He made new talent look good, kept the energy up backstage, and never threatened anyone's spot. That's what made him safe. That's what made him useful. But the moment he stopped playing along, he wasn't just a wrestler making a choice. He became a reminder that even the most loyal can walk away. That's the real threat. WWE doesn't want stars walking away on their own terms. It's not just bad optics, it sets a precedent. It tells other wrestlers that leaving is possible. That saying no is an option. That control can be refused. And that's where the punishment begins. No send-off. No thanks. Just avoid. There's a story from a production assistant who worked backstage during one of R-Truth's last appearances. They said everyone expected him to be around for another year. He was joking with people, helping younger talent with timing cues, even talking about new ideas for segments. Nothing felt final. There were no goodbyes. No one thought it was the end. Then, suddenly, he was gone. That's how abrupt it was. 1 week he's part of the team, the next, he's a ghost. People backstage were confused. They reached out. No response. Either he was instructed to stay silent, or he chose to walk quietly. Either way, it wasn't WWE that initiated the separation. It was him. That's the part that stings. WWE lost control of the exit. And in a company obsessed with writing the final chapter, having the last word taken from them is personal. The silence became the message. By not acknowledging him, they were making a statement: walk away, and we erase you. But the thing about truth, capital T, capital R, is that it doesn't stay buried. Fans started piecing it together. They saw the patterns. They compared it to other quiet exits. They remembered how WWE handled CM Punk. How they ignored Naomi and Sasha Banks. How they cut ties with stars who wanted freedom. And R-Truth, of all people, fit that pattern. Not because he made noise, but because he didn't. He left with dignity. With quiet strength. And that made it worse. WWE doesn't fear noise. They know how to handle loud. They fear silence. Because silence gives fans space to question. To speculate. To investigate. And the more they dig, the more they realize how many people WWE has tried to erase. R-Truth didn't burn a bridge. He didn't set fire to the building. He just walked out the front door, and never looked back. That's the most dangerous move of all. Because it means he never needed them. And WWE hates being reminded of that. They like to believe they're the destination. The goal. The top of the mountain. But when someone leaves willingly, it shakes that illusion. It tells the locker room that there's life after WWE. That fulfillment doesn't have to come with a logo. That freedom sometimes means letting go of the biggest platform if it means keeping your identity intact. R-Truth made that choice. And WWE responded the only way they knew how: erasure. But the erasure didn't work. Because the fans noticed. They asked questions. And now, the silence speaks volumes. There's an entire generation of fans who grew up watching R-Truth evolve. From K-Quick to TNA champion to comedy gold in WWE. He was more than a character, he was a constant. Someone who reminded people that wrestling could be fun. That it didn't always have to be about dominance or betrayal or backstabbing. Sometimes, it could just be about joy. And now he's gone, and that joy is missing. No fanfare. No send-off. Just a sudden, gaping hole. And the fans are still waiting for answers. They may never come from WWE. But they don't have to. Because the truth is already out there. And the fact that WWE is trying so hard to ignore it? That tells you everything you need to know. The first wave of fallout didn't come from WWE. It came from the absence itself. R-Truth was gone, and nobody was talking. For a company as polished and PR-driven as WWE, silence is never accidental. It's strategy. They know when to release a statement. When to stage a farewell. When to soften a departure. But when they stay completely quiet, it's not because they forgot. It's because they're angry. It's because they're bruised. It's because they want the message to be felt, not heard. That's what made this different. Fans weren't told to say goodbye. They weren't given a moment to applaud him. No graphic. No thank you tweet. Just radio silence. Like R-Truth had never existed. That kind of reaction doesn't come from indifference. It comes from resentment. Backstage, the energy shifted too. According to multiple sources, there were whispers almost immediately after Truth turned down the final offer. Not loud rumors, but quiet ones. Hushed tones in hallways. Trainers saying, he's probably gone for good. Staffers mentioning that his name was suddenly off all planning documents. Production people noticing old footage being pulled from segments where his face used to appear. The machine doesn't pause to explain. It just deletes, rewrites, and moves on. And within a week, people started realizing this wasn't a release. This was a purge. That's when the temperature in the locker room changed. The message was clear. If a guy like R-Truth can get iced out for saying no, anyone can. You could feel the tension in how people started acting. More polite in meetings. More cautious with suggestions. More silent during rewrites. That's what a quiet fallout does. It doesn't just punish the person who left, it warns the people still there. It says, stay in line. And while no one was being explicitly threatened, the environment didn't have to say it out loud. The message was in the atmosphere. For the newer talent, especially those trying to find their place, it was a reality check. R-Truth had always been seen as untouchable. Not because he was a top guy, but because he was beloved. If someone that likable, that easygoing, could get ghosted, what hope did they have? There's one story that stood out. A mid-card talent, backstage after a live show, reportedly asked a producer whether they could reference R-Truth in a promo as a nostalgic callback. The answer? A firm no. Not maybe later. Not check with creative. Just no. When pressed, the explanation was vague. Something about not reopening old stories. But everyone knew the real reason. His name wasn't banned in writing. It was banned in practice. And that's when people started asking, what did he do that made WWE this hostile? He didn't trash the company. He didn't leak emails. He didn't go on a shoot interview to bury anyone. He just said no. And in WWE's ecosystem, that's enough to get you iced out. Because no represents defiance. Even quiet, polite defiance. And WWE doesn't have a long memory for loyalty, only obedience. The merchandising team felt it too. They reportedly had new mock-ups of R-Truth apparel in development. A retro collection. Something for longtime fans. All scrapped. Why would a company kill off a product that was already in motion? Simple. Control the brand. Kill the association. Remove the variables. If R-Truth is no longer working with the company, they don't want his name generating profit without their oversight. They don't want fans celebrating someone who walked away without permission. They'd rather lose the money than lose the control. On social media, the censorship was subtle but telling. Fans noticed that older posts featuring R-Truth were harder to find. Tags weren't working. Mentions dried up. Even casual reposts of his classic segments were met with silence or got buried by the algorithm. It didn't take long for Reddit threads and YouTube comments to light up. Why is WWE pretending R-Truth never existed? What happened to R-Truth's merch? Why does this feel like a blacklist? The company never responded. Never clarified. And that silence only fueled more questions. The thing is, WWE thrives on storytelling. When someone is injured, they give updates. When someone is released, they often make a statement. Even when it's just standard fare, they control the narrative. But when they don't say anything, it's because the narrative slipped out of their hands. And that's what happened here. They didn't get to frame R-Truth's exit, so they acted like it didn't happen. Behind the scenes, TripleH was said to be visibly frustrated. Not in public. Not in front of the cameras. But in private. Multiple sources said he was upset that Truth didn't take the final offer. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about storyline plans. It was about principle. He expected Truth to say yes. Not because the offer was generous, but because Truth always said yes before. When someone who's always been compliant suddenly becomes independent, it doesn't just shock the system, it undermines it. It challenges the unspoken rule that once you're in, you owe the company everything until they say you're done. Truth broke that rule. And TripleH didn't have a response ready. He didn't expect to get turned down. He didn't expect to lose that piece of the puzzle. And the company's reaction? Remove the piece entirely. Erase it from sight. From a PR standpoint, the approach was risky. R-Truth isn't controversial. He's not polarizing. Fans across the board like him. He never gave them a reason not to. So WWE couldn't smear him. They couldn't frame him as difficult or unreliable. That narrative wouldn't hold. So they chose the next best option, pretend he doesn't exist. But here's the problem. R-Truth isn't someone you can erase. He's been part of the DNA of WWE for too long. From segments with The Rock to backstage skits with Vince, from championship matches to viral comedy, he's woven into the company's history. Fans remember. And WWE can't control memory. They can't wipe nostalgia. They can't mute emotion. Which is why, even with the silence, the blackout, the blacklist, questions still echo. Because when the laughter stopped, the mystery got louder. Why is R-Truth gone? What's the real story? And why does the company want so badly to pretend he never said goodbye? Those questions are still hanging in the air. And the answers, if WWE ever gives them, won't be as clean as they want them to be. Because this isn't about one man. It's about the fallout that happens when loyalty reaches its limit, and the system isn't ready for it. In public, Triple H is polished. He's the clean-cut, executive-turned-visionary who reinvented NXT, brought prestige back to wrestling, and re-established WWE's creative direction post-Vince. But behind the scenes, when things don't go his way, especially with talent he believes should fall in line, sources say a different version of Triple H can emerge. Not the calm decision-maker. The competitor. The chess player. The man who doesn't take no lightly. And that's the version that reportedly surfaced when R-Truth turned him down. Triple H had offered what was internally referred to as a legacy-light contract. Not a full-time performer's deal. More of a goodwill agreement. Limited bookings. Reduced pay. No guarantees. The kind of deal WWE offers to someone they want to keep close without making long-term commitments. He thought R-Truth would take it. Why wouldn't he? That's what people like R-Truth were supposed to do. Accept the reduced role. Take the lighter schedule. Stay under the brand umbrella. Smile on screen a few more times before quietly retiring into backstage obscurity. But he didn't. He said no. And that rejection wasn't just about the deal. It was about what the deal represented. R-Truth didn't want to be a placeholder. He didn't want to hang around just to be used when convenient. He didn't want to trade his presence for a favor. Triple H didn't expect that. And according to two different backstage staffers, he didn't handle it well. One producer said there was a meeting shortly after Truth's exit became official. The tone was sharp. Triple H wasn't yelling, but he wasn't calm either. Frustrated. Irritated. Calling the refusal short-sighted and ungrateful. Not to Truth's face, but behind closed doors, to creative leads. Another source said he told a member of the writing team to scrub all mentions of R-Truth from any upcoming scripts. Not just from future plans, but from flashbacks, promo packages, even joke references. That level of editing isn't standard. It's personal. And when that kind of reaction happens, it spreads. Writers hear it. Agents feel it. Superstars start whispering about it. He's blacklisted, one wrestler reportedly said. Not officially, but it's obvious. But the real tell came in how quickly Truth's digital footprint vanished. Within days, mentions were down. Algorithms changed. Search results dropped. There wasn't a press release, but internally, everyone got the message. Do not bring up R-Truth. Not because of scandal. Not because of drama. Because he walked out when he wasn't supposed to. Triple H has always had a complicated relationship with that kind of defiance. Back in his wrestling days, he was known for playing the long game. Keeping power centralized. Building alliances with the right people. That instinct didn't change when he moved into creative leadership. He respects loyalty. He rewards it, too. Look at the stars he brought back when he took over. Johnny Gargano, Dakota Kai, Bronson Reed, Karrion Kross. They had ties to him. They trusted him. He trusted them. But there's a catch. That loyalty has to be constant. The moment it's broken, even quietly, it's treated like betrayal. Which is why Truth's departure reportedly stung more than expected. This wasn't just another guy walking. This was a trusted veteran, a 20-year asset, turning down what the company framed as a favor. And in Triple H's world, favors aren't meant to be refused. It's a power structure thing. A hierarchy. Truth didn't just reject a deal, he stepped out of line. That's why the reaction was so swift. Quiet erasure. Internal frustration. A quiet fury simmering underneath the calm surface. There's a pattern if you know where to look. When Sasha Banks and Naomi walked out, WWE's reaction was instant and cold. Title belts were vacated. Commentary buried them. Their names vanished from promotional material. All orchestrated to maintain control. When William Regal left for AEW, reports suggested that Triple H was disappointed but respectful. But when Regal wanted to return, there were backstage murmurs that not everyone was thrilled. Loyalty, once lost, leaves a scar. So when R-Truth, a veteran who had never caused problems, never gone into business for himself, quietly walked, it didn't just trigger disappointment. It triggered offense. He was supposed to be one of the safe ones. The constants. The guaranteed yes. Instead, he turned his back. And Triple H, the man now seen as the player's coach, didn't know how to spin it. You can't call Truth difficult. You can't call him selfish. You can't say he wasn't drawing, because he was one of the few comedic talents who actually popped ratings. His backstage reputation was clean. His attitude was beloved. That's what made this different. The silence wasn't defensive. It was tactical. WWE, and Triple H specifically, chose silence because any public acknowledgement would have forced them to explain. To say something real. And if they had to explain, fans would start asking harder questions. Why didn't he get a farewell? Why was he offered less than he was worth? Why was someone who did everything right treated like he never existed? There were no good answers. So silence became the solution. Triple H, known for his pride, reportedly didn't speak Truth's name for weeks. Not in meetings. Not in passing. Not in discussions about legacy or tribute packages. The omission was intentional. And that's the point. For all the perception that Triple H is the cool boss, he's still a gatekeeper. Still someone who values structure, obedience, and control. When someone walks away, it's not just a business loss. It's a signal to others. And signals matter. That's why, even with no public blow-up, the tension was real. It wasn't about hatred. It was about precedent. If Truth walks, who's next? If Truth refuses a legacy deal, what does that say to the locker room? If Truth steps away without asking permission, how many others might get ideas? It's a fragile balance. WWE can't afford mass rebellion. So when someone breaks ranks, even quietly, they make an example out of them. Not through public humiliation. Through silence. Through absence. Through ghosting. And that's what R-Truth became. Not a controversy. A warning. A reminder that loyalty doesn't buy you freedom. That even the good soldiers get erased when they stop marching. And behind all of it, at the very top, was a man who didn't get his way. Triple H didn't yell about it on live TV. He didn't cut a promo. He just got quiet. And the company followed his lead. But silence, in this case, isn't strength. It's exposure. It shows just how much they relied on R-Truth to never say no. And now that he has? All they're left with is the sound of their own control cracking. In wrestling, contracts are supposed to protect both parties. They outline the money, the dates, the rights. On paper, everything seems mutual. Fair. Even. But WWE contracts don't play by normal rules. They're built to favor one side. And the deeper you go into the fine print, the more you start to understand how control doesn't end when a wrestler walks out the door. That's the part fans rarely see. The part R-Truth quietly walked away from. Because when you say no to WWE, you're not just walking away from your current role. You're walking into a maze of restrictions, clauses, and conditions that can follow you long after your final match. One of the biggest hidden weapons in WWE's contract structure is what insiders call the usage clause. It's not always named that in legal terms, but it functions like a switch. It determines whether a talent's name, likeness, moves, or catchphrases can be used after they've left. You think R-Truth owns Little Jimmy? Or What's Up? Or even the R-Truth name? He doesn't. WWE does. They trademarked all of it. That means when R-Truth turned down their offer, he didn't just give up a job, he gave up access to his own legacy. And he knew it. The name R-Truth itself is WWE intellectual property. It's listed in multiple trademark databases. WWE controls the usage. They can prevent it from being used in merchandising, TV, games, and even indie wrestling appearances. And when a performer exits on bad terms, or simply without agreeing to the conditions of departure, those rights get locked tight. That's likely what happened here. Truth didn't resign. WWE didn't release him with a public goodwill clause. There's no licensing agreement in place. That means they've effectively closed the vault on everything they own about his character. And they own a lot. His entrance music? WWE owns that. His catchphrases? WWE owns those. His visual likeness in WWE gear? Also theirs. Even if R-Truth wanted to do an independent appearance using his WWE persona, he legally couldn't. Not without a lawsuit or settlement. But it doesn't stop at name and image. There's more. Multiple former talents have revealed in interviews that WWE contracts sometimes include post-termination restrictions. These aren't just your standard non-compete clauses. They can limit what you can say, who you can work for, even what topics you're allowed to discuss in public interviews. They're built to protect the brand. But in practice, they muzzle the talent. For someone like R-Truth, who spent over 2 decades building goodwill with fans, those clauses matter. They're not just legal red tape. They're silencing tools. They shape the post-WWE narrative. And if you break those rules, the company reserves the right to pursue damages. Even speaking out, vaguely, can trigger threats. There are cases where released talent tried to share their experience, only to be met with immediate cease and desist letters. Not because they revealed confidential information, but because they questioned the structure. The culture. That's how tight the grip is. And this is exactly why we haven't heard much from R-Truth directly. It's not that he doesn't have something to say. It's that legally, he might not be allowed to say it. Unless he's willing to fight. Or unless he's waiting for the clock to run out on whatever post-contract limitations are still in effect. These clauses don't always last forever. Some expire after 90 days. Others after a year. But while they're active, the silence isn't just strategic, it's enforced. And WWE knows exactly how to use that silence. When someone leaves quietly, with clauses in place, the company gets the best of both worlds. No negative PR. No public fallout. No interviews to explain. Just silence. They get to pretend nothing happened while the talent sits in the shadows, unable to speak. And if the talent does try to push back, they hit them with the contract. There's also the issue of licensing. Every time WWE runs a package of old highlights, they choose what to show based on current branding rights. That's why you rarely see footage of certain ex-superstars, even if they were part of major storylines. If WWE isn't legally aligned with a former talent, they don't use the footage. Or they blur them out. Or they recut the video to focus on someone else. It's not pettiness. It's policy. That's how WWE maintains brand purity. If you're not on the team, you're not in the archives. That's likely what happened with R-Truth. Segments that used to feature him, especially from the 24/7 title era, are now being repackaged without his face. Not always blatantly, but edited just enough to shift focus. It's another form of erasure. Not total deletion. Just enough to keep him out of the spotlight. To remind everyone watching, the character lives here. And if the person behind the character isn't playing along, they're not welcome back. The irony is that R-Truth gave WWE some of its most memorable comedy in the last 10 years. He did it without scandal. Without ego. Without taking up too much space. But none of that matters when the contract ends. Because once it does, the company's protection stops. And their ownership kicks in. They own the story. They own the name. They own the legacy. And if you don't play ball, they don't let you borrow any of it. That's what makes this so cold. R-Truth didn't just walk away from a job. He walked away from everything he helped build, because he refused to let the contract own him. And in WWE, that's not just brave. It's costly. He didn't take the money. He didn't sign the terms. He didn't give them the right to parade his name around while reducing him to a cameo. He made the only choice that guaranteed him dignity. But in return, WWE used the only weapon they had left, control of the narrative. And right now, that means pretending he was never there. Until the contract clock runs out. Or until he decides to tell his story anyway. Silence can only last so long. Especially when it's not natural. Especially when it's enforced. For months, R-Truth didn't say a word about WWE. No shots taken. No cryptic tweets. No podcast appearances or interviews offering half-truths. He stayed off the radar, quiet and composed. And for a while, that suited WWE just fine. But silence doesn't mean peace. Sometimes, it means tension. Sometimes, it means pressure building without release. And eventually, something cracks. That's what happened. Not with a headline-grabbing shoot interview. Not with a backstage tell-all. But with small, deliberate signals. Posts. Mentions. A tone shift. The first sign came in the form of a social media post. R-Truth uploaded a short video, just him, sitting in his home studio, nodding along to music. No caption. No hashtags. Just one phrase in the background. They tried to tell me I was finished. It didn't trend. It didn't go viral. But for the people paying attention, it hit like a message. Then came a second post. This time, a photo. Truth in front of a mic, laughing. The caption read, "Sometimes, silence says more than 1,000 promos." Again, subtle. But no one missed the meaning. Then he showed up on a fan podcast, not a mainstream wrestling show, but a small one. The kind of place where you don't go unless you want to say something without being interrupted or packaged. He didn't go into details, but his message was clear. I don't hold any bitterness, he said. But I'm not going to let people rewrite what happened. He smiled while saying it. Kept it light. But there was steel underneath the words. And fans heard it. It was the first crack in the wall. R-Truth wasn't going to blow up the building. But he wasn't going to let it stand on a lie either. Why now? Because sometimes you need time to process what a company really meant to you. Truth had been with WWE for more than 20 years, off and on, through every version of the product. He'd survived the Attitude Era, the Ruthless Aggression Era, the PG Era, the Network Era. He'd been a heel, a face, a punchline, and a surprise highlight. You don't just walk away from that and immediately start throwing grenades. That's not who he is. But over time, you start to realize what you gave. And what you got back. And maybe, for Truth, the equation started to feel lopsided. On that same podcast, he said something else. You put your heart into something long enough, and you think it'll speak up for you when you stop. But silence is just silence. Sometimes, you've got to tell your own story. That was the shift. The signal that the old loyalty was giving way to something else, clarity. It's important to understand what Truth isn't doing here. He's not launching a smear campaign. He's not naming names or dragging down former coworkers. He's not trying to become the next ex-WWE guy who makes a second career out of bitterness. What he's doing is reclaiming authorship. When WWE tried to erase him, they weren't just erasing his role on screen. They were erasing context. Erasing contribution. They were replacing years of consistent performance with a single empty space. That's the part that cut the deepest. Because no matter how many matches you work, no matter how many segments you save with a joke or a perfectly timed reaction, the only thing that stays in the fans' minds is what gets replayed. And if they don't replay it? It fades. So, Truth began speaking, not with a megaphone, but with a scalpel. Precise. Quiet. Focused. Another interview. Another subtle quote. I was proud of what I built. But I didn't want to rent my legacy. I wanted to own it. That right there? That's the heart of it. He wasn't just talking about merchandise or appearances. He was talking about voice. About autonomy. About telling his story without asking for permission. Because once WWE shut the door and tried to make it seem like he never mattered, they gave him something more valuable than a retirement segment, a reason to finally speak. Fans started to notice more. He went live on Instagram unannounced. Talked about his music. Talked about ideas he'd pitched that never made air. Talked about how every backstage segment was a chance to test new material, even if the camera only caught 2 seconds of it. He was teaching in those moments. Explaining what it meant to be valuable in a system that treats you like a cog. But there was also weight in his voice. Not anger. Not bitterness. But disappointment. You always hope that loyalty counts for something, he said. But sometimes, it's just part of the costume. He didn't have to name names. Everyone knew who he meant. Because this wasn't just about a company ignoring a veteran. It was about a man realizing that no matter how long you play the game, the house still wins. Unless you leave the table. That's why he finally started talking. Not to lash out. To reframe. To remind people of what actually happened. WWE didn't cut him loose. He chose not to sign. They didn't retire him. He walked out. They didn't forget him. They erased him. And now, he was ready to fill in the gaps they tried to leave behind. Bit by bit, he began controlling the story again. Fan meet and greets became storytelling sessions. He told young wrestlers how to stay grounded. He reminded them not to confuse exposure with respect. He shared the truth behind viral moments, how much of it was improvised, how much was left out of the edit, how much was rewritten last minute by writers who barely knew him. He wasn't just speaking for himself. He was speaking for every talent who's been turned into a punchline by the same company they helped build. Because once you realize your legacy doesn't belong to them, you either fight to get it back, or you watch it fade into corporate memory. R-Truth chose to fight. Not with lawsuits. Not with bitterness. But with clarity. With his voice. With the same calm defiance that made him dangerous in the first place. And the more he talks, the more fans remember. They start rewatching old clips. They share his greatest segments. They ask the questions WWE hoped they'd forget. Why was he never given a proper title run? Why was he left out of tribute packages? Why was his loyalty never rewarded? That's what speaking out really means. It's not always about fireworks. Sometimes, it's about lighting one match at a time, until the whole room starts to see the truth.